morning, everybody. Buenos días a todos. Bonjour à tous. Everybody doing well? Good. Okay, thank you for coming and thank you for joining us online. My name is Orlando Cabrera Rivera. I am the head of the Environmental Quality Unit at the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. And on this morning's session, we're going to be presenting an overview of two initiatives of our unit, Air Quality Improvement for Environmental Justice and the North American Pollutant Research and Transfer Register Initiative, what we call initiatives that support the community's right to know. There will be the two presentations. The first one will be in Spanish, so we want to be sure to set up your devices for interpretation. The second one will be in English, and we will have a question and answer period after each presentation, although both presentations in a way are related. And so if we can start with the slide of the presentation, it will be great. The first presentation will be, first we're going to give you a brief overview of the work that we do at the Environmental Quality Unit of the Commission. If you can go to the, before that, we want to know first where you are joining us from. We can have the slide there on Slido. Okay, we have about half the people joining us from the US, a quarter from Mexico, and then from Canada, and then from other countries as well. Well, yeah, it's moving a little bit. So welcome to all of you joining us online from North America and other parts to this session. If we can go to the next slide, please. Then, okay, just a quick introduction to the work that we do in the Environmental Quality Unit of the CEC. Basically, we have four different main areas that we work on collaboratively amongst Canada, the US, and Mexico. We have geospatial environmental information, climate change, pollutants, and chemicals management. And a lot of those activities include information for decision making, public access to information. And you will see also, if you go to our exhibit area, some information about those projects as well. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide, and we're going to be providing first an overview of one of our initiatives, Air Quality Improvement for Environmental Justice. And it will be presented by Elizabeth Campos Sanchez, who is the project lead at the unit, and she's in charge of coordinating the work of this collaborative project. And again, this presentation will be in Spanish. The slides will be in English. So if you want to select your language of choice, and also in your devices, and also for those online via Zoom. And with all that, well, Elizabeth, please, go ahead.
Hola, buenos días.
Hello, good morning. Okay, I'm fortunate to be in this project since its creation. The objective is to create collaboration to measure and mitigate emissions and the exposure of PM 2.5 we wanted to start this presentation with a Slido question. The question is, if you know if in your community they measure air quality, and we see the results. We want to tell you that in the United States, Mexico, and Canada, the air quality is monitored officially by networks and stations. These stations have a cost of instruments in operation which is very high, and historically, their location has been like limited to urban areas where they concentrate the population. However, it has been about 20 years since they started coming into the market sensors and low-cost technologies, which has allowed people not only to be receivers of air quality, but also to emit. This has generated projects, community projects of air quality in cities where they are filling information gaps where we didn't have them before. And looking at the answers, I'm very happy that the majority of you have air quality information. And those of you who do not know that this initiative can help you to know what are the tools that are available to fill those gaps. And the next one, please. The next one. In very general, the initiative was presented in 2021 by the government of the United States with this community approach. But evaluating the black carbon, which is not very common in projects of community projects because we don't have too much technology available to assess this contaminant. Black carbon is part of the particulates of the 2.5 particles, and in any it is emitted from any burning of, for example, fuels, fossil fuels, and through rural communities in controlling and mitigating the emissions. You can deaccelerate this process of the high temperatures at a global level. And this black carbon, because of its property, interacts with the air and it reaches to the Arctic and it's deposited and it affects the ice cover. And once the implementing committee, which is made up of air quality experts from the three environmental area ministries in the three countries, they discussed the black carbon and in areas where it was important to have this type of evaluations. And there we did a mapping of role players, and we found that there are some organizations that already had community work or interest in air quality, and we did formal invitations to collaborate. And for 2024, we have three collaboration agreements based on communities in the three countries. In Canada, we worked with the three tribal communities, Mayac First Nation, in Mexico with Tosepan, and we haven't started to monitor, but this is how we have been carrying out the project. In general, we are going to work in areas which are contrasting and a desert, a tropical area. And each one of these areas has their own projects and they have their own priorities. And they're going to take it in a way that has sense with governance and decision making. In general, the topics that we have in each one of them, and that's what I wanted to share with you. For example, in the area of Canada, and the Angena tribe is in the city of Sarnia. They are in the chemical valley, and this is a pool of many contaminations. And the important sources in this area are industrial. Sarnia is in the border with the United States, with the state of Michigan, and there are certain transportation sources. And there's a lot of freights going through this area. In Mexico, in order to fill those gaps in the rural areas. There's not too much information regarding air quality. What we have are certain small photographs of where they install the monitors. So this gap is also related with many communities in Mexico that use firewood to cook and to carry out their daily work. So it was important to have or to take into consideration what was happening in these communities with regards to air chains. And this is how we were guided to find work synergies with Puebla and with this organization, Tosepan. In the case of the United States, we had the interest of working in a border area and specifically with the source of the burning of biomass in Imperial County, California. There is an area of contrast, because on the north we have agriculture, industrial agriculture, which is the most important of California. And in those activities, they allow the controlled burning. And depending on the meteorological conditions, they allow the burning. On the south side, we have a city of more than 1 million in population. And this is one of the sources that have this is a city that has contamination, which is part of a city like that one. Like it's part of like a city like Mexicali. And with the topic of environmental justice, we also wanted to focus on organizations with which we are going to be working. And we are going to see first extracts of the collaborators meetings that we had. We had the opportunity of having these meetings last month in Puebla, and in these extracts, the organizations are going to talk a little bit about their problems or their history. And we're going to start with Anjana in Canada. The video, please.
Around us. Whether you're concerned is considering that's the starting point we're coming from, the only acceptable level of justice is for ombudsmen to be a decision maker going forward with the government and the companies and other equal voice as to what the their limits can be for pollutants.
Muchas gracias. Y bueno,
Thank you very much. And can you please go to the next one? As you can see in the video, the main concern of the Amjinang First Nation is the industrialization of the area, and this nation has been recognized because they are demanding from industry as well as the provincial and federal governments to be responsible, be accountable regarding the industries because they have had effect on the environment and their health. These suits or demands there's a network of air quality monitoring that measure different contaminants. At this moment, they are not measuring in the region black carbon, because when we went to the environmental department of the Anjinang First Nation, we saw the possibility of including this contaminant, and not only that, but this monitoring network is going to be handled by them because it gives them the space to implement governance in data taking and to provide information. And this is in synergy with a project. In the next video, we are going to see a little bit about the Tosepan cooperatives. We are the union, a northwestern part of Puebla Sierra. Throughout these 47 years, we are already a fairly large population. We are working with the Masewal and the Tucane tribes, and we are already 52,000 cooperative members. This is a movement that we collectively have built and that we are weaving on a daily basis. This project for us, that means the good life. Thank you. In Mexico, we will have the opportunity of working with one of the indigenous communities, which is one of the most important ones in the country. This cooperative has many companies and organizations that work on a daily way with many of the members of the community. They work in the improvement of the population in general. In the area of the northern Sierra of Puebla, 98% of rural households use firewood for their main as their main fuel in more than a traditional use, and it has that component. We have learned from our collaborators that the population has energy autonomy, and in other type of fuels they wouldn't receive that type of autonomy to disappear it from their way of life. But we recognize that there's important incidence of respiratory diseases, and it's related to women and children and elders. And currently in Tosepan Foundation, they are working in a very interesting project, which is energy for Yekenmelis, or good living, which is alternative energy management model based on indigenous and campesino lifestyles. Among many things that this initiative is doing, it's in the academia is working with them in Mexico. They are presenting the evaluation of prototypes for stoves which do not use firewood anymore. And this is where we find the synergy with the project. And we started inviting this foundation to participate in order to give us data for the performance of each one of these prototypes in each one of the homes, and have data outside of the homes. We are going to have a relationship of what is being indoors and outdoors and how this black carbon is behaving, this contaminant. These data, beyond what they can contribute to the foundation in decision making, it contributes other important data for Mexico, because we will have a scope of more time of what is happening in this type of communities which depend on firewood. In the next video, you're going to see the executive director of environmental justice. Comité Cívico del Valle empezó hace más de 35 años. Ya han hecho estudios del agua, estudios de la calidad del aire, y empezamos a hacer investigación de las temas we started to do research for agricultural burning, and those of us who live in the border had the disadvantage that under U.S. law, all air distincts, and this use has to comply, and if it weren't for Mexico, so we always blame it on Mexico. Mr. Olmedo talked a little bit about the problem. The Comité Cívico del Valle, or the Civic Committee del Valle, it works with agricultures, with farmers and with migrants, and now they have many environmental projects, and they have been pioneers in this community projects. They have been for more than 15, well, almost 15 years, with data of air quality in projects that go from the community, made with the models of community monitoring, and they have been used in other communities in California, and they have tried to acknowledge this data in the public policy in the state and to have a collaboration with this group of people who are experts in air quality, which is very good for the project. And beyond that, with them, we found this synergy of black carbon. I didn't told them in detail, but the monitors that we will acquire in this initiative have it's very specific that it can identify the sources of industrial emissions and the agricultural burning emissions and the contaminating source a long time. And we found a synergy also that they wanted to include meteorological data within their monitoring network, and we will have more information regarding the wind direction, and we are happy because of what these synergy can have for this project. And the next one, please. I conclude my participation, and we're very, very excited regarding this initiative of community-based. In our meeting last month, we also saw the importance of sharing with these type of organizations that have so much work in their territories, and more than differences, they share many work values for the community. In the technical side, we will understand more the added value of adding black carbon to this type of monitoring, and we hope to report to the communities in order to the information that we will generate, and especially to share our experience beyond the region of North America. I'm at your service in order to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Si alguien está hablando, no los escucho.
Continue. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Ya te escucho.
Okay. Yeah. I was talking about the alignment between the theme of this meeting with this project, which is environmental justice through community empowerment. And here we see examples of communities actually leading the air quality monitoring project, having access to that information, being the owners of the information, and then with that information being part of the decision making process. And something very important that you mentioned at the end is, we're not doing this at the communities. The communities are coming together and sharing the information from the beginning. So we're working on this together from the beginning. So we have, if we have questions from the public, we have also questions from online. I think we have, they can be asked through Slido. So if you have any questions from the audience here or online, any questions, comments? Let me see if there are any questions online. No questions on the chat yet. Okay, there's a question here. If you can identify yourself and then ask your question.
Gracias. Buenos días. Mi nombre es Jacqueline Valenzuela del Centro de Energía Renovable y Calidad Ambiental CERCA. Primero, felicitarles por esta iniciativa y esto que nos acaban de presentar. Es muy importante para las comunidades saber
It is very important for the communities to know and to be trained in technical in order to have this information. I want to know how the based organizations that are here that work in Mexico, United States, and Canada can be added to this initiative that you presented. I understand. I want to know how we can participate in these programs that you have mentioned.
Yo puedo contestar, no sé si, perdón, es que no veo a Orlando, pero hola, muchas gracias por tu pregunta. Y bueno, esto
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
ahorita es como, pues estamos iniciando, vamos a
Right now, we are starting,
pues escalar esta iniciativa que se
and we have this initiative.
Bueno, dejo también a Orlando contestar tu pregunta. Gracias.
Thank you. Yes, as Elizabeth is mentioning, we are starting, but we have gotten close to this type of work, and at a given moment, we want to open doors to share information, the information of how to carry out this type of projects at a community level. We cannot leave it just as a project. We want it to be communicated, and we want other communities to have the opportunity of learning and sharing this knowledge. This type of activity we will have along the project.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Tengo una duda
I have a
en la
doubt
presentación que tiene que ver
that has to do
con los métodos
with the
que
method
están usando
that you
o
are
que
using
pretenden usar
or that you will
para
be
medir
trying
lo
to
que
use
llaman
to
carbono negro.
measure black carbon,
La
because the methodology to determine in Mexico, in the EPA, there's no method for sampling to determine
carbono negro.
black carbon.
¿Qué es el carbono negro? No sé cómo lo definen.
I don't know how you define black carbon,
A final de cuentas son
but in the end,
lo que sí hay son
well, we
métodos
do have
de muestreo
our sampling methods
de la concentración
and the determination of concentration of
como
PMs
calidad del aire,
in air quality in the labor areas.
los métodos para
Those are the methods to determine
concentraciones de partículas
concentrations of particles, PM10s and PM2.5. These are the methods that are approved in Mexico, Canada, and EPA. So can you please tell me
decirme qué métodos
what methods you are carrying out or what methods you will be using?
Si me permiten contestar y tal vez Orlando pueda complementar. Muchas gracias por su pregunta.
Thank you very much
Para medir
for your
carbono
question.
negro hay métodos indirectos y métodos térmicos. O cada el más directo es muy claro, pero el indirecto mide la señal pues óptica del carbono negro que está
the black carbon
siendo
that is being
colectado en unos filtros
collected
que continuamente están
and it is continuously
moviéndose dentro de los sensores.
moving
Hay pocos
within the
sensores
monitors.
de este tipo que pueden
We have those type of monitors,
y realmente son de
and
mediano
they
costo.
are
Pero
really,
bueno, sí, como bien lo dice, para un método
but
directo
like you said,
tendría que tomarse un muestreo,
we
ir al
would have to
laboratorio,
take a
que
sampling,
no es el caso
and
los monitores que estamos, o bueno, que vamos a usar.
the,
Pero bueno, tal vez Orlando
well,
pueda complementar un poco. Gracias.
Elizabeth, the difference between particulates and black carbon, these are optical properties. And these monitors of reference that measure and determine what portion of the PMs have black carbon according to the optical priorities. That's what we are measuring here. We have the monitors that are being used are not of low cost. There are many projects and the technology is not in reference,
mediano costo. Así que estamos,
and
digamos, innovando.
we are innovating with the communities.
There are a couple of questions online. This one from Clotilde, which is in Spanish. How can the coffee growing area of Sierra Negra be included in the different actions that will be carried out in the TOSEPA?
Muchas gracias. Pues como comentamos,
Thank you
esta
very
es una
much.
primera
And
acción
as we
y
said,
pues sí, de ser exitosa definitivamente tendríamos que hacer una segunda parte para sumar a otras comunidades. Orlando.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Yeah, exactamente. O sea, vamos a hablar con
Yes,
las
we are going to talk to the authorities and see how we can communicate, and we can add more organizations.
A question from Beatriz, also from Mexico. How can we contact organizations to integrate at a coastal community? Well, you can contact us, but by the way, we already have received some, or having approached by an organization doing work in the area of Manzanillo, in the port of Manzanillo in Mexico, where they are doing a community-based air quality monitoring, and they wanted to also see if they could work with us. So that is happening as we speak. And then we have another question from Gabriel, which is in Spanish. We're interested in the issue of atmospheric emissions from poor wastewater treatment, such as chlorine, methane, nitrous oxide, ammonia, and or hydrogen sulfide. And we would like to be part of the air quality monitoring network. Who should we contact? If I may answer this very quickly, I know, yeah, in this particular project, there is, we're focusing on black carbon. We know that, for example, Comité Cívico in California is starting some work on methane. I don't know the context of that, but some communities are doing that. And perhaps, I don't know if from Cerca, do you know anything about that? If you could.
¿Cuál fue la pregunta?
Hay una persona interesada también en monitorear.
There is a person also interested in monitoring of methane and other contaminants that are emitted from treated waters. And I understand that in the case of Imperial Valley, they were looking at the possibility of monitoring methane also, but I don't know what is the context. Besides, we belong to a binational organization in Comité Cívico del Valle, and in the border, we see the situation very frequently, the spilling of raw water and the waste from agriculture, and this has to do with the biology side. And we, in agricultural burning, they also burn from landfills, open landfills, and they emit these emissions, and there is the relevance to measure the methane. And there are low-cost devices that allow us, low and medium cost, that allow us to monitor methane, mainly as preventing fires, spontaneous fires that we see in open-air landfills, and they affect the population. With all these characteristics that we have, that is a part of methane. Because of the fires that are caused, that are created in the open air dumps, and also in places which are far out. So this can be measured. We have measured them, and there are COVs, and we can prove that in the air we can see these COVs floating, and we can get rid of them. So the population gets sick with these spills of raw water, of not untreated waters, and they affect at-risk communities.
We have to move on to the next presentation. This is also in Spanish, comes from Mexico. What is the support that the local authorities in the project in Mexico, in the case of Tausepan or Quetzalan, are providing? And actually, in the case of Mexico, the National Institute of Ecology and Climate Change is providing the technical support for the community. We are now in the procurement process for the monitors, and the training will be done at the offices of the Institute, and then they will support the work of the installation of the monitors and working with the community as well on that. So there's local support. And Elizabeth?
Sí, solo para complementar, también hay dentro del componente intramuros que se va a analizar.
We also have the component of interiors in Puebla.
Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México,
And
y también, bueno, parte de nuestros...
well, also part...
pues sí, de las personas que están en el comité implementador, también está la parte de gente de la Semarnat, Secretaría del Aire. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And
muchas gracias por la oportunidad. Una disculpa por no poder estar ahí presencialmente.
Thank you for all your questions, and you can continue the questions and we can reply to them later. Now we're going to move on with another presentation on our North American Pollutant Releases and Transfer Register Initiative, or the North American Pollutant PRTR Initiative by Daniel Vallée, who is the lead of the initiative for the last 17, 18 years now. And thank you. And I will be back there to support the presentation.
Thank you, Orlando. Hi, everyone. As Orlando said, my name is Danielle Vallée. I work with Orlando, Elizabeth, and a few other people in the Environmental Quality Unit at the CEC. So I will be giving you a very brief presentation about the North American PRTR Initiative. I think that we wanted to ask a question via Slido about maybe your knowledge of PRTR. So what we'd like to ask you is if you've ever used PRTR data to explore pollutant releases and transfers in your area or anywhere really. So this is a question in relation to the presentation that Elizabeth just gave. One of the communities that is involved in that project is the Aamjiwnaang First Nation in Sarnia, Ontario, in Canada. And we've worked with the Aamjiwnaang First Nation in the past, actually in 2006, 2007. We wanted to know about the level of awareness of PRTR data in communities, and in particular in Indigenous communities at the time in Canada and the United States. And if you're interested, we did a short study that in general showed that in those communities, as well as communities everywhere, I think in North America, the level of awareness at that time was a little bit low. And I've brought some brochures. They're at our exhibit table if you're interested in looking at those case studies that we did. Well, so those are the results. So, all right, we'll go to the next slide then. So basically, to answer the question, what is a pollutant release and transfer register? Well, basically every year, industrial facilities report their pollutants to a national register. called a PRTR. They report on their releases on site, that is pollutant releases to air, water, land, in underground injection, and so on. They also report their pollutant transfers off-site. So those pollutants might be sent to treatment of some kind, to disposal or to recycling as well. And more recently, facilities have also been reporting on their pollution prevention activities. So those data are made publicly available, and they're used to track industrial pollutants, as well as to inform decisions about pollution prevention and chemical safety. So next slide, please. So a bit of background about PRTRs. Basically, some of you might know that there was a very important industrial accident in Bhopal, India in 1984. The Union Carbide chemical manufacturing plant manufactures pesticides and other chemicals, accidentally spilled, released to air, very toxic methyl isocyanate, and almost 500,000 people were exposed. Thousands of deaths have been attributed to that accident, and many thousands actually permanently disabled. To this day, there has been little accountability on the part of Union Carbide, which is now Dow Chemical, as well as the Indian government and other actors. So that's what that picture shows. It says Bhopal disaster 1984 to ? The suffering continues, so does the struggle. There have been other accidents, well known, many others not known, in North America. And so in 1986, the United States passed the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act. So this act supports public access to information on the use and release of chemicals in communities. Very importantly, it led to the development or the establishment of the first PRTR, which is known as the Toxics Release Inventory in the United States. In 1993, Canada established its own PRTR, the National Pollutant Release Inventory. In 1994, the CEC was established, and among the council priorities at the time and ongoing to today were public safety and chemicals management. And that led to the establishment of the North American PRTR Initiative. And then in 2006, through the support of the CEC, Canada and US PRTRs, Mexico established its own mandatory PRTR, the Registro de Emisiones y Transferencia de Contaminantes. So basically, PRTRs were established as a community right-to-know tool, so it's very relevant to our discussions today of environmental justice. The environmental justice concerns that are related to industrial pollutants are things like lack of access to information about the sources, types, and amounts of chemicals that are released to air, water, land, and so on. The associated health and environmental risks of those pollutants, as well as questions about monitoring and enforcement of industrial activities. And then there are also concerns about barriers to participation in decisions about industrial activities, such as the location of industrial facilities, their permits, and so on. Next slide, please. That slide. So very quickly, there are about 40 PRTRs. The PRTRs are a global phenomenon, and there are about 40 in the world today, with another 10 or so that are in the pilot project or development phase. The OECD in 1992 established the PRTR work group, and that group supports the development of PRTRs in the 35 member countries. So there are PRTRs really in all of the regions of the world. There are some legal instruments that support PRTRs, such as the Aarhus Convention. The Escazú Agreement is very similar to Aarhus for Latin America, and those instruments focus on access to information, public participation, and environmental justice. And, well, I've circled there the North American region, and that's just to say that the North American PRTR Initiative brings together data from the PRTRs of Canada, the United States, and Mexico, And we're really considered a model of regional cooperation because of the tight collaboration we have with the 3 PRTR programs in North America. Next slide, please. Basically, the objectives are the initiative are to improve public access to and use of regional PRTR data, to promote data quality and comparability, so to support pollution prevention and sustainability within industry in North America. In relation to that objective, each PRTR program has its own unique nature, its own list of substances that are subject to reporting, industrial sectors that are subject to reporting, terminology, and so on. And so we work closely with the 3 PRTR programs to ensure the quality and comparability of PRTR data, to promote increased comparability so that we can get better reporting basically across the region. And last but not least, we engage everyone who is concerned about industrial pollution and access to environmental information. Next slide, please. So our activities, well, the first is the data that we bring together, we make public through our Taking Stock Online website and integrated North American PRTR database. And you'll see a quick demonstration in a few minutes. So we harmonize the data. We bring in data that are similar from the 3 countries. We harmonize the reporting fields. You know, we ensure that the kind of data that from Canada, US, and Mexico are comparable so that people can really understand if they are releases to air, if they're what kind of disposal they are, that sort of thing. Comparability is quite important, given, of course, that we know that pollution does not know national boundaries. And so, for instance, if you want to know about pollution affecting a shared watershed, well, you can take a look at data reported on both sides of the border to see maybe what pollutants have been released into that watershed. So secondly, we have our Taking Stock report series, and we encourage you to visit our website and you can find those. We bring together the data, we analyze the data, we present, you know, the releases to various types of releases and transfers. We analyze them by sector, by pollutant. We also do special feature analyses. For instance, if you want to know about reporting from the mining sector, we've done a special feature on that, on releases to water. Our last Taking Stock report looked at transfers to disposal, all types of disposal and the types of risks that are associated with that, and so on. As I said, we work with the 3 programs, not only the 3 programs, but industry sectors, NGOs, various experts to review the data to really ensure that, you know, try to better understand the reporting and quality and comparability of data. And then, as I said, we like to engage the public in to share information so that we can always continue to improve the North American PRTR Initiative. And we have, in terms of our comparability work, we have an action plan that sort of serves as our roadmap. So I'll talk about that. We'll show you that a little bit. So we'll go to the demo of Taking Stock Online. Orlando's going to help me with that. So this basically is our landing page for our website. In the last few years, we've made some improvements to the website. We've added more contextual information, interactive data graphics, and so on. The little text in the introduction says that we bring data together for about 40,000 facilities across the region. So those are all types of industry sectors that have reported for a 17-year period between 2006 and 2022. This right now is our test site, but we will be very shortly publishing the 2021-22 data. And by the end of this year, we'll have data for 2023. For the first time as well, we're going to have some facility-specific greenhouse gas data in Taking Stock Online. In the top menu bar, we have links to various resources. We talked about our taking stock reports, the action plan to enhance the comparability of the 3 PRTRs. And there's also an understanding taking stock where you can find information that can help you interpret the data, understand the context of reporting and that sort of thing. If we go a little further down on the page, so those images there show some of the sectors for which the data are in taking stock online. For instance, electronics manufacturing, fossil fuel combustion, food production. So these are just some of the sectors where you'll find data in on this site. So here, this is an interactive graphic. If you want to get a sense of what's reported by industrial facilities, on the left-hand side, you see on-site releases as well as disposals. And by clicking on any of those, the graphic underneath changes. So you'll see, you know, if you're looking at top pollutants, you'll see the top pollutants that, for instance, are released to water. So the graph changes. And you can do the same with off-site transfers there. You'll see the graph change underneath. And there are a few options for that graphic. You can select by top pollutants, but you can also select by top industry sectors. And so when you make a selection like that, there's information on the right as well. That's context information. You'll learn about reporting requirements. If you're looking at top industries, you'll find out about the reporting requirements for industries, that sort of thing. So contextual information, and there's also, it changes if you take a look at pollutants. You can choose the year or year of that you're interested in looking at. You can use you can choose the location. It can be for the entire region, or you can choose one country. And then finally, there are pollutant types. In Taking Stock Online, we include 4 types of pollutants. That's known or suspected carcinogens, developmental or reproductive toxicants, metals, as well as persistent bioaccumulative and toxic pollutants, or PBTs. Not all pollutants are necessarily grouped that way, but many of them are. So then further down, we have a little graphic here that shows cross-border transfers, which are a subset of all of the data reported, or all of the transfers reported in North America. These are the transfers that cross national boundaries. So again, you can select a year, and the map shifts a little bit. So, and then we'll go down to the bottom of the page. So these are the 3 main entry points to the website. You have the overall database, you have the cross-border transfers that we just mentioned, and you also have Map the Data. We'll take a quick look at that. And that basically, you know, as the name suggests, brings you to a map where you have options on the left to select the parameters, the country, types of releases or transfers, and then you can click on a facility point. The blue dots represent groupings of facilities, and then the yellow ones are individual ones. And if you click on a dot, it'll bring you to a little summary for that facility, and then you can also click on the link and go into the database. So we'll just go back to the main landing page, and we'll query the main database. So just very briefly, this is the user interface. If you're interested in querying information to find out more about industrial releases and transfers, we talked about the Aamjiwnaang First Nation in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada. So here we have at the top, you can do a variety of reports. You can do a facility report. Well, you'll get a list of facilities. You can look at pollutants. You can do a pollutant-based report. You can do an industry sector-based report, one by country or for the region, all sorts of things. And then, so if we were to look at facilities in Sarnia, we can do a facility report. Then you can also ungroup by pollutant or industry sector. That gives you more details. You can select the year or year that you're interested in. In this case, we know we're interested in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada, but you can also just include all communities. There are other parameters. You can choose the type of release or transfer. So these are all things that you can select. You can look at a watershed. There are a number of parameters you can look at. And then what you do at the end is you click submit. And that would bring you to a query. And we've preloaded a query just to give you an example. So for Sarnia, Ontario, when you click submit, it brings you to a results page that looks like this. And so in the left-hand corner, the top left-hand, you've got your summary. And that's actually interactive. So if you decide that you want to look at another parameter, an additional year or a different year, releases to water instead of releases to air, that sort of thing, you can modify it there. There's a little inset map, and that map is directly related to the facilities that are shown in the table below. Right now, all of the dots are sort of all converged on each other, but it basically represents the facilities in that table. So that table shows you the names of the facilities, the top 10 in this case. You can expand it. It shows you the facilities that reported releases to air in 2022 in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada. If you click on, there's a show or hide column tab. If you click on that, you can select more parameters. So you have a few options if you want to change your query. Then if you close that, so going back to the table, if you hover, there's a little symbol to the left of all of the facility names here. That gives you a little summary for that facility of all its releases and transfers for that year. So it can give you an indication if you see that, well, I was looking at releases to air, but I see that this facility really has very large releases to water, then you might decide to click on releases to water, select that and explore those. Now, you can also sort your columns to the right. So if we sort, for instance, releases to air, so it's sorted right now. Yeah, you can sort in ascending or descending order. If we sort it in descending order, we see that Imperial Oil, the Sarnia refinery, actually has the highest releases to air reported in Sarnia. And so, and you see what type, you have information about the type of industry that it is. I think it's not showing there, but maybe I didn't put it in the query. Anyway, so if we click on that Imperial Oil, so if we can click on that facility name, Imperial Oil, we can get further details about its releases. So it brings you to an additional page. It shows you the location of the facility, and you have a few tables here that give you information about the facility. The last table shows you the specific pollutants that were released to air by this facility. So you can expand the table rather than seeing just the top 10. I think there are 46 for this facility. And you can sort, again, the releases to air column. So this is in descending order, and we see that sulfuric acid is the top reported pollutant for this facility. So, you know, that gives you a certain amount of information, but you might also want to have an understanding of, you know, once you know that, what does that mean? Well, you can also get a sense of the relative risk of the pollutants that are released by facilities. So if we click on the Show Hide Column tab, you can click at the top there, you see TEP score. And a TEP score, that means toxic equivalency potential. So for releases to air and water only, many pollutants have associated toxicity toxicity equivalency potential weights. And that gives you a relative, an idea of the relative risk of that particular pollutant. And it's one risk scoring mechanism. There are others, but we have information about that in our Understanding Taking Stock link and in our Taking Stock reports as well. So now we could, for instance, so we had sulfuric acid as the top pollutant, but if we sort for instance, the cancer risk score column, we see now that actually the top pollutant in terms of relative risk is cadmium in its compounds. In terms of actual releases to air, there were 10 kilograms approximately of cadmium and compounds released to air, but we see that its relative risk is in the hundreds of thousands of kilograms. That's basically saying that for its potential to cause cancer, that's like the equivalent of a couple of 100,000 kilograms of benzene released to air. Benzene is the reference chemical for carcinogens. And we have toluene, which is a reference chemical for non-cancer effects like developmental reproductive harm and so on. So I won't get into the details, but there's information about TEP scores on our site. So and when you look, we also have information, there are little symbols next to the pollutant name. In the case of cadmium, we see that it's actually in the 4 pollutant types that we talked about. It's a known or suspected carcinogen, it's a metal, a PBT, and also a developmental or reproductive toxicant. So it's just to say that it's not to say that sulfuric acid doesn't create issues when released to air, but it's just to say that in terms of relative risk, cadmium is also a very important pollutant. If you hover over the pollutant name, finally, it'll tell you if that pollutant is subject to reporting in the 3 PRTR programs. In this case, it is, and it also shows you at what thresholds it has to be reported. And I guess finally, if you might be interested in changing your query, looking at releases to water, we know, as Elizabeth pointed out before, that Sarnia is actually located on the Canada-US border. It shares a common watershed. It's on the St. Clair River, which is part of the St. Lawrence River watershed. So you might be interested in looking at the pollutants that are reported on both sides of the border that end up, that are directly released to water, for instance. So that's one thing you might want to do. I would say that finally you can click on the export button and you can download the data into an Excel spreadsheet. You can also display them via Google Earth if you want to do your own analyses. Yeah, and I think that that's pretty much it. So we just wanted to show you, in case you were interested in using the Taking Stock online database. I guess with that, I'll leave it there. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Maybe Orlando as well.
Hello. Hello. My name is Orion Kriegman. I'm with the Boston Food Forest Coalition. And I just was curious if nuclear waste is part of what is tracked. And a second question is, do you track transfers outside of North America?
Thanks for the question. Good questions. In fact, all energy generating facilities have to report, well, except that some of the, importantly, radionuclides are not subject to reporting. In Canada, there was a debate about that. My friend Faye could tell you more about that, but there was some debate about bringing radionuclides into Canada's PRTR system. They chose to sort of link to the data that are collected under the nuclear agency in Canada. In terms of transfers outside of North America, yes, that's something that we're looking at increasingly. Actually, we've got a project with the OECD to look at what's coming into North America and going to other countries. And so, what we find is that when we use the data get improved. People look at it, we look at what the issues are. And so, yeah.
Congratulations for this effort and this useful tool. And my question is, there is a directly relation with the environmental authorities in Mexico, like Semarnat, Comisión Nacional de Hidrocarburos, to know this information, but more or that apply a kind of sanction of this pollutant industry?
The RETSE program, the PRTR, is under Semarnat at the national level. There are also state level PRTR programs. I think they're not quite as strong as the national PRTR, and not that many states have them. I think that in terms of enforcement of industrial activity, it's Profepa that is in charge of enforcement. So that's the relationship. And we work closely with Semarnat and the environment agencies of Canada and US as well. Oh, yes.
I'm curious if you could share a little bit about the reporting standards that you had, and then also if there's any information in your database about regulatory standards for each of the individual countries.
Well, I guess the standards, the reporting, the regulations for reporting are basically that industries that meet certain thresholds have to report. So that's what the PRTR laws in the three countries mandate, and those reporting levels are generally a certain set of industries. Canada's PRTR is the only one that does not make any particular exception for industries. Generally, all industries in Canada have to report. In Mexico and the United States, certain industries, many manufacturing as well as resource-based industries, have to report. There are some exceptions. For instance, in the United States, oil and gas extraction facilities do not have to report. In Mexico, certain industries that are actually at a state level or even municipal level, for instance, public wastewater treatment plants, don't report because they're not under national jurisdiction. I guess in terms of the standards for the industries, that's another thing. PRTR data won't tell you whether, for instance, an industry is in compliance with its permitting obligations. So that's something separate that has to be looked into if there's a concern, for instance, when you see the data.
I am a little bit confused of your presentation. First, a question. I have a lot of questions, especially about transfer. Is the transfer by water, by soil, by air? What media is transferring from Mexico to Canada?
Yeah,
or vice versa?
So that the air, water, those would be considered releases. A direct discharge to water, it would be a release. A transfer is actually when the waste pollutants are sent, for instance, to a form of treatment. So they can actually be taken and sent across. They can be sent to a facility in the same country, or they can be sent to a facility across a national border for treatment. For instance, we see sulfuric acid. We see transfers from the United States to Canada, and they can be sent for disposal in another country. We do see that. And so they're not direct releases to air, releases to water. And I know in Mexico, sometimes the use of transfers can be, a little bit different from how they're considered in Canada and the United States. And so that's why we sort of harmonize those fields, and we have our taking stock terminology, which fairly well represents the terminology used in the three countries.
A comment. I don't know if Canada has enforceable power over this activity of transfer, but in Mexico, there is an obligation to report. but it's not enforceable. And in the US, I don't know that it's enforceable. I mean, I kind of believe that it's not enforceable either. It's just an statistic activity. Where things are going, for what can I do about that? Just to know where it is. And which is a good statistic, but or not enforceable. So if it's not enforceable, what is the point in wasting money and time and all that?
Well, actually, you might want to read the last taking stock report that we developed. It's on our site. I think we might have brought copies for the exhibit area as well. We looked at transfers, and in fact, I mean, each country has, there can be a bit of a patchwork of authorities involved in transfers if it's considered hazardous waste, and the three countries have somewhat differing definitions about hazardous waste, as well as the authorities that manage that waste. But there is, some oversight. Sometimes there are gaps in that oversight. So, and we've kind of, I think we described it fairly well in the last taking stock report, but we'd be interested in, continuing the conversation if there are particular things you're interested in. Yeah.
Oh, good. Can I continue, or there are more questions? Or?
Yeah. Okay.
If I may, just to address the issue of transfers, the transfers are tracked. Let's say are reported to the PRTR, and what we need to know is, okay, you send something, a substance which is toxic, to recycling or for input to another industry across borders. Where does it go? The people who live near the community needs to know what's coming into the place. Is it the toxic that is going for treatment? Is it going to be recycled? What happened with the part that hasn't been recycled? Where does it go for disposal? So those types of issues and information is what we want to ensure people have access to by using this database. I just want to also see if any people online have any questions. While we wait, please go ahead.
You're right about publishing and putting information valuable like the one you just described. The last person that talked, I'm referring to him. Because in order to enforce something, it's not enough statistics. It has to be in the law. If it's not in the law, it's not enforceable. So, and the next question that I have is, are you determining these pollutants in the source, don't you? Okay. But if you want to transfer through water, or you want to transfer through air from Mexico to Canada or to the US, it's not going to be the same concentration that you determine in the source. If it's by air and you determine 100 milligrams per cubic meter in the source, it's not going to be the same in the air. So, and if it travels thousands of miles, you may not even detect it. So how did the transfer get to one place to another?
And PRTR data don't try to, they won't give you information about the ambient concentrations of a pollutant in the air or that. What you're seeing is what a facility reports if it's used. The standard threshold is 10,000 kilograms or more. The thresholds vary by pollutant. Pollutants that are considered more problematic often have lower thresholds. But a facility will report that it released, 25,000 kilograms of pollutant X. And based on that, looking at that information, that's when you want to know, well, what's problematic. One way to do it is, for instance, those TEP scores that we looked at, but also asking questions. Yeah, it's a starting point to look to see whether there's a problem.
Both systems, the Mexican system of reporting and the US system of reporting. And so thank you for your information. Okay.
Welcome, thank you.
Okay, and we have one question from our online participants, but I think this will be the last one, since I believe we're full lunch. And we want to make sure that we keep the schedule. It's an anonymous. Do you foresee possibilities of collaboration with other regions within the framework of the UN Convention on Climate Change regarding the emission reported on the PRTRs? Well, we already have collaborations with other regional PRTR initiatives, as Daniel mentioned, the OECD, for example, in terms of climate change. We have also worked in the past with our different countries in terms of the comparability of emissions inventories of greenhouse gases. And I hope that answers the question. I don't know if you have any.
No, just to say that we hope to continually add to the greenhouse gases that we're going to showcase for the first time in Taking Stock Online this year, and that's facility-specific greenhouse gases. So among those PRTR facilities reporting, if they also emit greenhouse gases, we'll have data and we'll be adding to that as time goes.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you for your questions from the room, also from online. Again, if you have any further questions, please keep sending them, and we'll be able to answer them later. I want to also remind you that we have a questionnaire about the event. So if you could please take a moment to complete it, the survey. So it's going to be online and also here in the room. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Daniel. And we'll be around if you have any additional questions. Thank you.